Hi everyone, back here again today. I cannot wait to get my new stand that I ordered, so I don't have to do this anymore like this with this phone. How's everyone doing today? I'm trying to get this as clear as possible for everyone. And for those of you on Instagram, if you'd like to see from the top view down, you can go and simultaneously watch it on Facebook as well. And you'll see this really nice, clear view of what we're drawing here today. So good to see everyone. How's everyone feeling today? I'm not even sure what day this is. The days are starting to run into each other. I'm sure you're experiencing something similar. We have a lot to talk about today and to cover. And I'm starting off by showing this one particular geometry. And now normally, most people in geometry know that there are no Platonic solids or Archimedean solids or geometries that use heptagons. A heptagon is, or sometimes referred to as septagon, seven-sided polygon. And I just found one today, which is pretty exciting. And that's what I have right here. So I'll show you guys first on Facebook, and then I'll lift it up for everybody. But basically, what you have here is a hexagon at the center. So one, two, three, four, five, 6 sides. And this is all out of Flower of Life. As you can see, the Flower of Life in the background as well. And Flower of Life, I went ahead and did here because it helped me to find the different nodal points. And one thing I wanted to mention is that yesterday we talked about mathematical constants and how the Flower of Life overlapping intersections of those waves actually creates that dynamic, and it creates the mathematical constants that come off of the center of a circle. And then you can use trigonometry and Thales theorem, as well as the sort of right angle understanding of theta. You might remember this in school in trigonometry. We won't go through it here too much, but sine, cosine, and tangent, and then cosecant, cotangent, and cosecant, and which are just the reciprocal values. And you could basically use that to make measurements very exact and perfectly. And so what I found here was that these natural lines of the heptagon in perspective were showing up inside the Flower of Life and again Metatron's cube as just natural extensions. And so you could see that the hexagon's at the center, but then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sides of the heptagon. Now it's perfectly in perspective as well. It's as if it's popping out at me, so I know then it's not just by accident that that exists. And I've often wondered why there are no geometric structures that utilize the heptagon, because it's got a 1/x value that is very interesting, 0.14285714, and I believe that's the foundation of electromagnetism and gravity. And the number 7 accomplishes that all on its own. So the number 7 really is a special number. So for this opportunity to have found a polytope, which, multiple-sided geometry that uses heptagons, that's kind of a big deal for geometry and for geometricians, I guess. So I called over to Talal and I talked to Jonathan Leaf and Marshall Lefferts this morning, because it seems like almost every day we're getting new geometry out of this. And the upshot of that is every time we get a new geometry, that means, in my mind, that awareness is expanding, consciousness is expanding. So I'm pretty excited about this. So today we're going to work off of this. This is going to be the starting point. And we're going to do one of the other totally new geometries that we found only a couple of days ago. And that is this intersection or merger between the dodecahedron, which we all know quite well, and the cube octahedron. So those two together is going to be what we're going to overlay on top of this to increase the complexity. Now there's also another new geometry that I posted on Instagram. You can't see it as well here because it's already in the nesting, but it was a stellated form of hexagons as well as pyramids. So coming off of this, you can see the points of it. The stellations are here. So here, 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 here. So there's 12 stellations around it. And this would be looking at it like it's a ball with spikes coming off of it. So that's pretty exciting as well. That's another new geometric structure that I've not seen before. So we're breaking new ground here, which is really exciting. So you don't have to start with all this stuff in the background, don't worry. All we're gonna do is learn how on top of this, amid this complexity, we're gonna draw this structure right here. So first of all, we know that this is the cuboctahedron, and then this is the dodecahedron, and this is the new one, which I guess I'm calling the Grantahedron, and it's a cross between these two things, the cuboctahedron, which seems to emerge right out of the dodecahedron, which I think is also some significance that we don't fully understand yet. But we're going to draw this structure in today's class. So I'm going to go ahead and get started right from that. Now, for those of you that are on the Instagram page, I'm going to flip this so you can see it real quick. And you can see here the 7 sides of this heptagon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 sides basically making up this, this very interesting new geometry that is emerging out of the flower of life in Metatron's cube. So, so there we go. And I think everyone can see this. So let's go ahead and get started and draw this new geometric structure as well. So I've already started by putting in place a circle, right? And you can see I've got this very complex geometry here on the page already. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight these lines that are around it here. Now you remember that the first line that you make in Metatron's cube to get all those perspective lines is to connect one of these points, right, with a midpoint of another one of the points. So where it's meeting a hexagon, because it forms an inner hexagon inside. So you can see this hexagon right here, right? There's a large hexagon which comes out of this. So right along these lines right here. So a midpoint would be right here, right? Because it's right on this center line of this point, right? So I just highlight that a little bit for you. Okay, there you go. So you can see that point, and now I need to connect that to another one of these points over here so that I can get my lines of perspective on this and use it. That's why I just highlighted the one I already made. And then use it to be able to make things like the dodecahedron, etc. And you'll see that as soon as you do that, right, it automatically starts to bring out this perspective that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see right away. So I'll show this, and you can see the top part of a pentagon. It's basically already emerging out of this. It just comes right out of it. By drawing that line. So then we've got these lines right here, which are basically giving us the lines of a pentagon. And if I go ahead and highlight this, make sure everyone can see this. Okay, great, I can. So I'm going to basically highlight these lines right here. Right, and then this one right here. And then we're kind of right back into the familiar feel of the dodecahedron. And see, now all of a sudden we've got this in perspective pentagon. It's just basically formed out of this. So that's pretty cool, right? Now all of a sudden we can see the top part of this new Grantahedron structure that we're going to make out of this. Okay, so we've got our first pentagon. Everyone can see that, right? All right. So that's giving us the first form of this larger structure. Now, let me make sure I got this right. So I've got here, let's see, did I do this right or did I do this backwards? Because it looks like it's a little bit too small. I think it needs to be larger. Yeah, I think I basically needed to cut these across, not these ones, but it doesn't matter. I can fix this. Yeah, that's what I did here. That's what I did. Yeah, so it needs to go, well, I can actually still do it this way. It's just I need to, well, I'll go ahead and fix it this way. So this is giving me that line connecting here. This line is connecting here. I'm gonna basically have to go across here. There we go. So this line and this line will be right here and right here. There we go. Sometimes when you got these complex drawings, it's easy to lose your perspective. There you go. And then this is going to cut across. Yeah, there we go. So then this cuts across from there to there. Make sure that this is matching up correctly. Yes, it is. Okay. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay, pull this a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to bring this down so that I don't get distracted off of this, because once your mind gets into a mode of seeing something, then it's hard to break the bias of that thing. I think there's a great lesson in that too. Once you've seen something, it's hard to unsee something. Which, by the way, that was a cool pentagon that was here, but we don't need it for this drawing. And we need to try our best to unsee what we have seen. I think that's interesting, because we all are subject to bias, every one of us. We get so used to things being a certain way that when they flip to something else, we can't even still see the something else. It's like that story I told in one of the earlier classes about Cortez when he came from Spain as a conquistador to conquer the Americas. And what did he do? Well, he basically decided to go after the Aztec gold, right? When he went after the Aztec gold, he brought these 300 men with him. He had 6 ships. And all the men went to relieve themselves after they got off the boats in the forest, and then they came back out to the beach and they see all these boats on fire. And he's like, why are the boats on fire? The reason the boats are on fire is because he burned the boats. And he said, I burned the ships so we can't go back. And that's the whole point. How do we basically, if we don't have any choice but to go forward, then in his thinking, maybe it was flawed, maybe it was not, then he at least could enforce that everybody wouldn't be thinking, oh, we should just give up and go home. Instead, he decided to go forward, right? And that's basically a great lesson for us all. In that, the Spaniards, and you can debate whether it was good or bad what they did, but they did it. And they They said, look, we've got all the Aztec gold to go and get, and there's only 300 of us, and there's 3 million of them. And so they went and got the gold. Okay, there we go. See, now all of a sudden it should be much easier. This is going to pop out because we had to unsee what we were basically putting in place. All right, so now I'm going to keep going around on this. I should be able to go, yeah, the outer one. This one's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay. And this is going to be half, so it's got to go. Okay, this. And then let's go ahead and do this across here. There's so many lines, sometimes you get confused. There we go. There we go. Make sure this is straight. There we go. Yeah. This one is. We'll come back to this. Okay. So then that's got to go right across that. There we go. It's easy to get disoriented sometimes. Okay. Now. That cuts across like this. Yeah, there we go. It definitely gets harder when you've got lots of nestings. There we go. But we found it. Even when you've drawn it 1,000 times. So as things get more complex, they get harder for sure. Okay, so then we know we've got, right, we can take this pentagon that goes all the way up to this point here now, right? And then it's going to give us triangle. It's going to go, yeah, let's take it to this point right there, the top part of this, so the nesting is right. All right, there we go. There we go. There we go. All right, so we know this line comes down here normally to make the dodecahedron, but we're not making a dodecahedron today. We're going to make a different structure altogether. So now we've got also the back lines that are going to go here. There we go. So now we can do the same thing, and it's going to go to there as well. So all the pentagons remain in the same position with this new geometry. What happens is in the cube octahedron, there's triangles and squares. And now in this new geometry, it's triangles, squares, and pentagons. So you can see this pentagon that's behind right here on the bottom, so that stays. Okay. This one stays. All right, and I'll just build this one a little bit more. There we go. So it takes quite a bit of concentration, right? Now I'm going to start to draw my first line in my center triangle. So I'm going to go right here. Okay. So you can see that first in perspective square face right there. You can see the next in perspective square face. It's just like putting together a puzzle. It's not easy right away, but then once you finally see it, it kind of comes together pretty quick. There we go. I can do another triangle line here. Now look what that did. It made a natural octahedron out of the structure that was already there. You can see the octahedron right in here, right in perspective. It just came right out. There you go. So we're gonna bold this so you guys can see it. I'm gonna draw the lines behind as well. Okay, so the next line is going to come up to, let's see, how can I find this inside this mess of lines? Is it coming right? Yeah, it's going to go right up to there. Okay, and then this becomes the inverted triangle also, which is behind. There you go. Now I can erase some of these lines so I can give it all the perspective that it needs to have. But there you go. There. So now I'm going to go ahead and use a darker, I guess I'll just have to press down really hard. Okay, and I will go ahead and make this one pretty big because this is the framing lines I'm making now. Okay. And again, if you make mistakes, it doesn't really matter because you're going to color this anyway. It's important to try to get it as exact as possible. Okay, so I framed my first square, which is a square in perspective. Just like this pentagon here is in perspective. I'll do the next square. I bet you guys never thought you'd be working on something this complex. It's hard to see, but when you can get it, then that really makes it special. Always want to push yourself, challenge yourself. So some people were asking me yesterday on one of the chat rooms about I Ching. I have a little story about I Ching. So when I was in college, a long time ago, about 30 years ago, I was taking a classical Chinese class, and we all had to practice our artistic drawing of Chinese writing. And I decided to use a particular script as my subject of my drawing. And it was interesting because I didn't really even know the significance of it at the time. And it was about, I don't know, 25 years later. And by the way, I had it framed. I was so proud of it when I finished it. It's sitting in my office. It's still on the wall. And something I did in college. The only thing I did in college that I kept on my wall. And I was studying one day about the I Ching. And I was like, wait a minute. When I looked at it in actual Chinese script, I was like, I recognize this. What is this? And only to find out that, of course, what I had drawn 25 years before in Chinese, what's called Butgulshi, was actually the I Ching. And I had no clue. I had no clue of the I Ching's significance, but just something about that particular calligraphy that I had been working on, I don't know, it completely resonated for me. So as a result, I kept it on my wall all these years. And I was going to go to my office the other day and pick it up. And I went to the office and I picked up a bunch of other stuff, but I forgot to pick that up. But it's funny because I have not gotten a single question about I Ching until yesterday. And then the day after I forgot to pick it up, I got like 5 questions from people about I Ching. I Ching is this very interesting set of blocks, I guess. And these blocks, if you look at the Korean flag is built off of the I Ching. And so there are, elements in there, kind of like earth, fire, water, air, same type thing, but they also use wood. But basically, the I Ching has also been shown now to be related to DNA itself. Shock of shocks. And the way that it's arranged. It's kind of hard to explain all that the I Ching is. I'm definitely a fan. I've studied it. And it relates back to, and there's 64 different configurations of the I Ching, and those 64 relate back to, guess what? The flower of life. It relates back to exactly the 64-point star tetrahedron that is born off of the flower of life. And my friend the Sim did a lot of work on this, probably about 15 or 20 years ago. And you can find videos on the internet about that as well. But yeah, I had thought about sharing the I Ching with you guys, and then I get a question about it just yesterday. I also got questions about like number theory and why, first of all, number theory is a branch of mathematics that's called information theory. And I had called this morning with two different information theory kind of experts in encryption who are both analysts for a big group called Gartner. And we were talking about this type of work. And, I think the way we look at numbers is bounded within duality. Now, you might say, what the heck does that mean? Well, we look at the number 7, for example, and when we look at number 7, we think that that number is just the number 7 and it's nothing more than the number 7. Well, actually, it's a lot more than the number 7. The number 7 is just a compression the universe uses as a way to encode the 1 over x value of the number 7, which is 0.142855714 repeating infinitely. And it's our own duality mindset that makes it so that we can't unsee the number 7 only when we see the number 7. Even though from the universe's perspective, it's more than the number 7. Right? The number 7 is this infinite series of numbers of doubling math. They're the same numbers. 1 doubles to 2, 2 doubles to 4, 4 doubles to 8, 8 doubles to 16, which 1 plus 6 equals 7. And then basically it just rearranges those numbers. So it's the same exact numbers. It's just that it goes in, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1, 4 instead of 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1. And this is a pattern that the entire universe makes. Light. It is the foundation of electricity, electromagnetism. And this is the work of Talal Ghuanam, and you can see this in his book, The Mystery of Numbers, and it's also fundamental to my work in understanding the wave dualistic nature of both light and matter, and thereby numbers, because numbers and geometry are the foundation of all that we perceive. Now, you could take that all the way to a theory about holography. That's up to you. But definitely, the way we perceive numbers is very limited. We should be looking to try to unsee, in a way, the number, just like when I made the mistake here. It was hard for me to unsee it, so I had to erase it. In a certain way, there's a lot of elements of our understanding of mathematics that, candidly, we're going to have to just erase. Because it blocks us from being able to see the higher dimensional aspects of it. So in a way, we have to follow the admonition of Yoda when he's talking to Luke Skywalker, and he says, you must unlearn what you have learned. That is so true. It is so fundamentally true. So we now have this new Grantahedron. That looks pretty cool. So we have the Grantahedron here, and I can draw the back lines for it, and I will in just a second. But then we also have this new geometry with the 7-sided, it's built of the 7-sided heptagon and a hexagon, and what look to be either diamonds or squares. And I'll need to model this out on computer to figure out if that's a diamond or a square in perspective. Then we have this new stellated geometry in the center, and I don't know why, but it kind of is reminding me of time somehow, and a compass. Don't know why, but it definitely is. So I'm just drawing these back lines now, one here. What a wonderful day to be able to do this. too wide. Why did it do that? Oh, I went too far. Yep. There we go. Life is a series of learnings, learning from mistakes, and there really are no mistakes. Now I'm trying to not draw so that I have to erase a ton. So that's why I skipped those two lines like that. When I put this into overlapping perspective. Oops. There we go. Okay, we're almost done with this now, at least for the part we're going to do here. There we go. So I'll show you one of the things that I like to do when I draw these is, let's see if I can find the colors. And here is the Prismacolor. Let's see what color should we use for this new structure. Let's see, Pourpre Foncé, whatever that is exactly. Men aren't as good with colors. Maybe it's because our brains aren't well equipped for it. But what I'd like to do, just to show you guys how to get this perspective coming out of the color as well, and get the right shading, etc., is I like to erase everything that's inside the framing. That way it makes it easier to color. It's time consuming, that's for sure. But now I can color this a lot easier, and certain lines that are even from the framing that I don't necessarily want to show up, I can take out as well. It's a nice thing about this kind of small eraser, like this right here. This works great. And hopefully, I bought a bunch of these before, but I certainly hope that quarantine is over before I run out of these erasers. Because they don't sell these at CVS. I can make do with other kinds of erasers, and I have plenty, but... So I would basically clean all this up and erase all the lines inside of this structure that I want to have this outer structure be overlapping. So even these cool lines right here. So, as I was explaining earlier, numbers have both discrete values and they have values that would be wave values. And those wave values would be their 1 over x infinite expression. And for prime numbers, those would be infinite. Now, there are 3 types of numbers. There are numbers that are irrational, like we've talked about. That's like appending the ing, turning a noun into a verb. Then we have numbers that are rational, right, which would be finite. They're discrete versus continuous. If they're infinite, we call them continuous. And then we have a different kind of number, which is the binary expansions generally. So those numbers are discrete and discrete on both sides of their expression. So imagine that every number is split up into a yin-yang expression. And the way that that yin-yang expression is achieved is just by taking the reciprocal value of that number. I was talking about trigonometry a moment ago. Trigonometry has secant, which is the sine reciprocal value, right? Sine of an angle, theta. So that's how I do this. And then it has a, so you'll have numbers that are like the number 7, which are discrete on one side, they're continuous on the other, on their 1 over x value. You have numbers like 2 that are discrete on both sides because the 1 over x of 2 is 5. And the 1 over x of 6 is 0.16666 repeating. So that's a wave. It's infinite. These are called repeating rationals. But it's still infinite. So that means it's continuous. Now, why am I even telling you guys about this? Well, in physics, there's something called wave-particle duality. And you may remember something, if you took physics class, the controversy of Schrodinger's cat, right? It's kind of this basic approach of if a tree falls in the forest, did it ever really happen if nobody saw it? Would the entire universe potentially not exist if nobody were there to observe it? And we know already from something called the double slit phenomenon that consciousness and observation interacts with the world around it. So you can never separate the observation from the observed. What do I mean by that? It means in general that what you believe you're going to see is what you see, and you may not see anything else. So it's impossible to remove bias from what you see. It was funny, today, one fellow went onto my Instagram and I had posted a picture of the Templar cross and also of a tomato. And he immediately wrote on there, he's like, "Isn't this a white supremacist symbol?" And I wrote back and I said, you know what? Don't confuse differentiation of expression by the universe with discrimination. Right? It's kind of like that old saying, if you're a hammer, then everything you see looks like a nail. And we can't unsee what we have seen. We can't unobserve what we've already observed. So we can get locked in our way of thinking about our world around us and then miss so many new messages that are coming at us. Maybe we can't see it. And I think that's what Da Vinci means when he said, learn how to see. Realize that everything is connected, right? The way that I fix that type of problem like that is I might try to take my little eraser a little bit here, where I just colored out of the lines. I might just try to lighten it a tiny, tiny bit. And then it's not going to matter because I'm going to then take and frame this so then no one will even notice. And that'll just be part of the there you go. See? Can't even tell that it was there. So this idea that you and your observation is interacting with the world around you is such a fundamental thing to recognize. So they've done this experiment called the double slit experiment. And if you have never looked this up or never read about this or watched a video, there's so many videos you can watch on YouTube about the double slit experiment. Now, this is something that even Einstein didn't fully comprehend. That and entanglements. The double slit phenomenon was hard for him to fully wrap his brain around because it was kind of right up against and acted as an affront to this concept of materialism, that the world around us has nothing to do with how we perceive it. And yet, you've already heard me say that 90% of what happens to us is what we perceived happened to us. In fact, you could have the same circumstances and 30 different people witness the same crime and say 30 different things that occurred to them. We've all played that game before, like the game of rumor, right? What were you told? Oh, I was told this, I was told this, and everyone may have been told the same thing, but they all heard different things, right? That's the nature of how we perceive in this reality. It's a subjective reality. Even Plato tried to teach us about this when he taught about the allegory of the cave. That the world around you is subjective to your own experience. And the way they prove this with the double slit phenomenon, which, by the way, they also did one called the delayed choice experiment. The delayed choice experiment basically showed that this acted independent of time even. That somehow the future knew the past was going to occur the way that it was going to occur. It's a fascinating experiment. You can learn about that too. There's a great PBS special on the delayed choice double slit experiment. And worth watching, definitely, if you're interested in this kind of stuff. What it basically says is that, they turned on a camera, or they shot photons or electrons, it doesn't matter, and they wanted to know if electrons and photons were going to be a wave or if they were going to be acting like a particle. Were they going to be discrete value or were they going to be a infinite value? Discrete would be a particle and infinite value would be a wave of distribution of possibilities. Because if it's a wave, then if they fire it through two slits, then the waves would interact with each other and create a distribution or a pattern that would be like a gradation pattern along this radioisotope paper that they use to track this. And what they found is that when they turned the camera on to observe it, it acted differently than when they didn't have a camera on to observe it at all. And in the delayed choice experiment, they even found that if the camera was on and it would ever be reviewed or ever seen by another human and observed the film, because they would actually use this quantum eraser to turn it off, and they would do it randomly, somehow the wave that would normally act as a wave would flip to a particle if it knew it was ever going to be observed. And I mean retroactively, like it knew in the past what was going to be its fate in the future. And this is mainstream science. This is not like crazy out there scientific stuff. This is mainstream science that I'm talking about here. So we cannot separate the observation of whatever it is that's around us, because until we observe it, it will likely act as a wave, and that's what this experiment showed. Once it's observed, it acts as a particle. Now, numbers are the exact same thing. If we're ascribing discrete value, right, of the wave, if we're describing a discrete value to a particular potential for particle or wave, that would be like assigning a number to it. Or we're going to put a number to this value. And in effect, once it knows you're going to observe it, it's going to show up as the number 7. Until you observe it, it'll show up as a distribution, an infinite distribution of numbers of the 1 over x value. Now, isn't that a very, very mind-bending concept? How could it know? How would it ever know? Right? That seems to be impossible. It's not impossible. And just as matter has been proven to have both properties as a wave and properties as discrete value in the most materialist sense, numbers already have the same inherent properties embedded within them. And those inherent properties are sitting inside of what I just described to you, is basically the 1 over x and the x over 1 values. Now, this is like cutting edge science, what I'm talking about. But breaking out of duality is nothing more than basically being able to expand your perception beyond what you've already believed. If the best analogy I could think of is if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? If you can break out of that mentality, and why geometry is so important is because I have not found any better tool than geometry and learning how to draw geometry that has more powerful expansion of consciousness benefit to be able to see other perceptions and other perspectives. The more perspectives, the more perception that you can see, the different angular reference points, all the different ways of seeing this mess of lines, the more you expand your view, and you can train yourself by using geometry in this sense. Not only will you have more empathy for those around you, and you'll start to see other people's truth, not just your own truth, or the collection of all of your observations and biases. But now you can actually see a different level of understanding. You can empathize with other views and perspectives better. It also makes you less judgmental. And every time we judge ourselves, or every time we judge other people, all we're really doing is we're judging ourselves. Have you ever noticed that the people that bitch and complain generally about how other people are doing something that they don't like, that they think is reprehensible or wrong, it's usually those same people that are doing those things. So there's this great saying, if you spot it, that means you got it. So we literally live in this world where every time we judge something, we could stop ourselves and say, before we make that judgment, I am that, I am. I am the thing that I am judging. And once we start to realize that I am that thing, and the things that trigger me, I used to get pissed off all the time about Donald Trump. It used to drive me insane. And then one day I finally said to myself, geez, man, if it's bothering me, what he does, then I must do those things also. And I just I'm not even consciously aware of it. If I spot it in him, that means I must have it. I must have some of the same characteristics that the guy has. Geez, how could that be? It's completely invisible to me. And that's why I'm having this experience of getting triggered by another person and their actions, which I shouldn't be triggered by. I shouldn't be upset. I shouldn't get out of control. And so that's the message. Every time we get triggered by some action in other people, actually, that's our own subconscious trying to tell us, dude, clean up your own house. This is what you need to learn. This is for your experience and your benefit. And instead of looking at it as, oh man, life happened to me, realize instead that the universe doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. It happens for all of us. The experience that we're going through right now, this is happening for us. Because we cannot separate our experience, our ultimate observation, from the sum total, the cumulative effect of all of our observations and biases. With that, everyone, I'm going to leave you. That's a deep thought. And hope you all have a wonderful day. Much love to all of you. Bye.